Welcome. We should be live now. Sorry we're late.
Awesome. Awesome. Welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shanebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And what an intriguing topic we have today, from wound to strength, your Chiron placement.
Yeah. Chiron is something that's not super. I don't think super looked at by most people because of its. I think it's fairly new. I don't know how long it's been in the astrological chart as well.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Maybe we should just preface everything by just saying we're not astrologers. Basically, what we want to try to show today is how someone can take their Chiron placement and get an idea of what some of their core or deeper woundings are. Chiron is representative of our wounds, basically, are some of our deepest wounds, and basically taking that information of the placement and the house that it's placed in, and using that information to determine within ourselves where we probably are going to be doing lessons and work this lifetime.
Yes, exactly.
That's really the only that's the benefit to it, and what we're trying to show here. But we're not astrologers, so everything we say you can take with a grain of salt. Do your own research.
Yes, we just want to offer this tool that we've looked into that has been helpful for our own inner work.
Exactly.
And I also want to say we also did a show on the North Node and the South Node in your astrological chart, which has also been such a great tool and gift, I think, for both of us in our inner work. So North Node, South Node, Chiron placement. To me, these two are really, really helpful in our ascension process.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like, we'll find the Chiron wounding to be sort of one of the major obstacles into moving into our North Node as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of the the issues that we have that prevent us from stepping into the North Node can be seen in the Chiron placement. So
yes, and maybe after we're done with the intro, we can just give examples of our own North Node, South Node, and our own Chiron placements to just sort of show what we're talking about.
Yeah, certainly. And this stuff doesn't sit in my memory very well, so I'll go off as best I can off memory. But I think I wanted to say as well that astrology, it has precision to it, depending on the system that you're looking at. Like the measurements are precise. But once we're out of the measurements, we're talking more in intuitive feeling, emotion. So whatever you read may or may not feel like it resonates. So what I tend to recommend people do is try to feel into what they're reading about these charts and the signs and the houses, and because you can have your sign, you can have like your sign be in a certain house or certain chart or a certain position with respect to a planet or something, or Chiron or whatever it is. But parts of the typical thing, the typical experience of that placement may not totally resonate. So it doesn't have to be so. Like a lot of people, we come from, the reason I say this, we come from medicine and scientific thought and mathematical type precision, and also we come from a lot of modeling, like the Myers-Briggs modeling, or in other personality modeling systems that we've created, like psychological systems, and those are quite precise, or meant to be quite precise. Astrology is meant to be precise in that it, the planets were where they were, but the explanations and what that individual experiences beyond that is very widely varied. So it can show in so many different ways. So it's just if you're reading it and it's not making sense to you, it just doesn't feel like either there's just the thing that's there that is to be looked at isn't, you're not aware of it yet, or it's just not it's, there's something about this explanation that's just not really resonating with your trajectory. And that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay. It doesn't mean anything's been done wrong. It just means that there's probably other places to look.
Yeah. So like everything, just run everything through your own
Yeah,
system, your own guidance system.
exactly.
So first of all, what is Chiron? And what I've read about it is it's a comet with a very unique and erratic orbit.
Yeah, it's a type of comet that they call a centaur.
Ah.
Yeah. Now I don't know why they call it a centaur. And if you're familiar with Greek mythology, I think it's Greek mythology where the centaurs came, but it's like half man, half horse, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure exactly what that's meant to represent. My thought is that, like, what comes to mind is that the whole self is not in alignment with itself. Basically, so if we're half of us is a part that maybe we don't want to be, or maybe is different than what we would intend to show up as. So there's a whole bunch of mythology there as well that I'm sure there's lots of connections and lots of interesting riddles that can be looked at in symbolism and stuff in those stories around the centaurs and Chiron. And I think there was a relationship with some of the gods in Greek mythology as well. So yeah, we can look at all that. But yeah, it's a centaur, whatever that means. And it did you want to talk about it more? Did you want to go through how you see Chiron?
That's the end of my understanding of it, that it's a comet.
So
yeah.
I'll explain just my astrological understanding of it. And again, I'm not an astrologer. I think I did this stuff in past lives, so I pick it up fairly quickly, but I don't seem to feel called to like really, go right into it. I don't feel resonant in like memorizing all the stuff and all that. It seems just like too much work to me. But with that said, I do know some of the basics. So Chiron, the way I see Chiron is a lot of people call Chiron the wounded healer. This is because Chiron represents sort of a core wounding. These wounds that Chiron represents are established in the first like year and a half or 2 years or so of the person's life, or they're pre-programmed, I would say, like they're
previous
pre-incarnation, or there's some core balancing that the higher self has noticed is out of alignment from past incarnations, other karmic involvements, whatever, and is trying to resolve that through this Chiron placement. And one thing that's the most important thing to recognize is that everyone has a Chiron placement, because everyone has a core Chiron wounding that they're working through in this lifetime. And even if the Chiron wounding is fairly minimal or isn't hugely affecting you, it's still going to be a thing. It's called the wounded healer because it tends to be an area that is really difficult to traverse for you. But when you do traverse it and heal some of the damage, or I don't even like to say damage or even healing, but healing implies, healing implies you were broken, and then you've become healed. When more accurately, you've just sort of forgotten the truth about yourself because of the wounds and the trauma, and so you're learning to remember the truth of yourself through balancing. You're not really healing anything so much. We use that word a lot, but it's not quite precise as far as what we're doing. Because we're just remembering that we were prior to the wounding, during the wounding, after the wounding, we were always divine and perfect as we were. So we realized later that we never were really wounded. We just sort of thought that we were less than we are, if that makes sense. So in Chiron, when we end up healing those wounds, they tend to be opportunities for us to help other people with similar wounds. So for example, a way that we might do this, maybe we'll talk just a little bit about my Chiron placements.
Yeah,
you want to do that,
let's start with yours.
or do you want to start with yours?
Um,
it's up to you. I'm good either way.
Okay, can we start with mine?
Sure.
Okay, so
I don't like to just talk in like constant, I like to hand it off.
Yeah,
right?
That's why I thought, oh, maybe I'll jump in because you did a great intro. And thank you so much because I don't really know much about Chiron at all. So
I don't know that much either. So,
learn.
Okay,
so my Chiron, okay. And then after this, we'll tell people how to get their information too, because I want to make sure we cover that too. Okay, but anyway, my Chiron is in Aries. And so the way I found that was I looked on a chart, and I was born in 1968 in October. And in April of 1968, Chiron moved into Aries. And then what's also a bit interesting is the day after my birthday is October 17th. On October 18th, 1968, Chiron moved into Pisces. So I have some energy there of Chiron in Pisces as well because it's in the cusp. But just to make it simple, we'll just talk about Chiron in Aries. And okay, so first of all, my Chiron is in Aries. And then to find out which house Chiron is in my natal chart, I just looked on my actual natal chart, which is right here. And maybe later we'll put up.
I'll put it up right now.
Image. Okay.
So in my face cam, that's the symbol. That's the symbol for Chiron. It looks like a K with a circle on the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's the Chiron symbol. So for me, you can see that it's in my second house. Okay, so when I've looked up the information, and this is all still a bit new to me, what I've read is that Chiron in Aries means that I have some wounds around relationships in general, relationships with others, and relationships sort of in general. And then because Chiron is in my second house, which is the house of like finances and resources and material possessions, it means my wound is very specifically in my relationship to these things, in my relationship to finances and resources and material possessions. And I just learned about this through you and me talking about it, maybe like last month. We just figured this out, or we were talking about it for the first time.
Actually, it's really interesting because I brought this up
maybe
a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it wasn't when we first met, but I brought it up. We had started dating, I think, already. And I brought it up, but you didn't.
You mentioned my Chiron wound.
Yeah, like I basically told you, I think I told you your Chiron placement. I talked about the stuff that I was noticing in mine. And you seemed like you thought like your normal self. You were like, "Oh, cool," but you didn't bite on it.
I didn't really grab onto it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting to me because this is one of the questions I have is why now? Why is this coming to me now? I'm 53. It seems like it's just interesting that this is coming in for me now. So, and it's really interesting that you share that you were bringing this to my attention a year ago or so, and I
Well,
wasn't.
because I
Well,
knew
it wasn't.
you go through your Chiron return at 50. So I
Okay.
knew you would have went through your Chiron return. Um,
And
wi-
what does that? What exactly does the Chiron return mean?
my understanding is that if the wound hasn't already really been healed, that it gets the
The
volume
volume.
gets turned up. We tend
Ah.
to be put into situations where, like, I don't know, if we have a wound about asserting ourselves or our self-confidence, let's say, in relationship to others, maybe we'll suddenly be being bullied by family, or
Okay.
we something like that, where we don't necessarily need to be aggressive, but we need to stand up for ourselves and speak our
Yes.
truth, something
Okay.
like
So this
that.
is like very interesting to me because I'll just back up and say, really, my whole lifetime looking back, I have had this fear around, can I financially support myself? This has been a huge fear of mine. And I think it actually probably informed even my sort of dating experience and like choice of husband. I ended up marrying a person who is a wonderful man in so many ways, and I did love him, but he was also a surgeon. And I think because I had this fear of can I financially support myself, I think part of me wanted to marry someone who did have a very stable and financially abundant
Yeah.
job. So it's really interesting to me. And then when I was so before I was 50, we divorced, my ex-husband and I, and then of course I had to face this fear, this wound. I needed to financially support myself. So it's interesting that around 50 was when all of this stuff was coming even more profoundly in my consciousness because of my divorce. So everything you said makes sense. And to me, another interesting aspect of this is, although I've had this fear my whole life, I've also had this knowingness that it's my trajectory to be financially successful and abundant, and to really help others with that, maybe especially women. I can just feel that in my heart that that is my path in this incarnation. So to me, it's super interesting that this learning about the Chiron placement has just been confirmation of my own knowingness and my own fears. Like it all makes sense. It kind of blows my mind. It makes sense perfectly. And so then part of my question is, why am I understanding this now? Why am I getting the confirmation externally now and
Yeah.
not earlier?
Um, so the best way that I can describe this is, um, especially all growth opportunity. Uh, there's a lot of random stuff that sort of happens with our day to day, just kind of random. Um, it doesn't necessarily have a deep lesson in it. It's just stuff that's going on in living. But when it starts to come into some of the deeper territories of our wounding, or some of the work we're doing in ourselves, or our framing of the reality, some of the core structural type stuff, um, basically we're not given the opportunity to review areas that we're not yet ready. We're not calling for that lesson yet, because we haven't done the preliminary lessons. So when I brought it up, you thought it was a cool, like, you said that's interesting and stuff, and but it didn't pull you into it because it wasn't for you at that moment, right? And even if you did get pulled into it, it probably wouldn't hit you the way that it did, and then and you like have all these realizations and insights, it because they're the months it was months and months ago. Like I don't know exactly when I did it, but I'm sure if we just search our message history for Chiron, you'll be able to scroll all the way to months and months ago when I was bringing it up and saying stuff. I don't remember exactly what I said. I thought I told you yours and mine and how some of these things work. I talked about Chiron return and some things. Um,
Yes. And if
and,
I can just jump in for a second, what's coming up for me intuitively is that the past year, especially, I have gone so deep into this fear of finances and being able to financially support myself. And I even did this practice where I don't know if I was in the Akashic records or just I was just sort of meditating, but uh, um I saw many past lives where I really struggled financially and I lost my children and I was in poverty and I basically lost everything. Um I think in more than one lifetime. And another interesting thing, I often see this image of a stone hut, a stone dwelling in Ireland. And I get in the potato famine. So I think that was also part of a lifetime that I experienced too. So just some lifetime, like many of us, I don't think this is uncommon, just some lifetimes with a lot of poverty and losing everything
yep.
and all of that. So it makes sense that I'm healing or remembering the truth of who I am in this lifetime. So the what I take from the timeline of me just now understanding my Chiron placement is if say a year ago when you first brought that up to me, I really got into it and grasped onto it and learned about it, it would have been in a way like too comforting. It would have been like, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, I have this wound. And I don't think I would have done that deeper inner work that I have ended up doing this year. From I didn't know that that was just my thing in this lifetime. I didn't
Right.
know that. And I think if I knew that, I wouldn't have examined it so closely.
Right. So, another way to think about this, if you don't want to think about it like the lesson plans, and you have to do preliminary lessons. Another way to think about it is depending on the category that these things are in, and there's so many categories of lessons and things. It's like it's infinite, basically. Um,
Yeah.
so, for example, you would have had to notice a certain amount of your fear in this area for you to then start to go, but why am I so afraid? Why? And start to call, why? And then the information will come. But if you're not aware of the fear, then the universe
Yes.
isn't going to bring it
Give you
and show
those
it,
answers. Yes.
right,
Yes.
show you answers and stuff, because you're not
Yes.
aware and you're not asking,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so
Exactly.
yeah, so whether it's like a preliminary lesson, there are some lessons that are like, that are sort of core, that the universe just kind of is waiting to be called, and so we call when is appropriate, and until
Yeah.
we're aware that we have a certain type of fear that's really deep, we notice it and we're like, oh, I didn't
Yes.
realize how scared I was of this. I've known it's been a
Yes.
thing, obviously, but I wasn't so curious about it. And our curiosity is usually the spark of like where our lessons, we're drawing ourselves to a lesson usually, right? So um of some kind. So yeah, so exactly, so basically, everything, and I use this to remind myself to like be patient, because lots of times I want to have certain answers for certain things right away, and I need to remember that I don't know what answers are appropriate for me to have right now. I need to trust that my higher guidance, which sees everything much more clearly than I do, um, can help me know when that's the right time. Just let that happen,
Yes.
and that it is the right time. And it can't come
Yes.
in earlier than the right time, because then it won't make any sense and you'll ignore it anyway. Um,
So,
so
just for anyone listening right now live, or anyone listening to the recording of this later, from what we're talking about, it would seem if you are here listening to this, then it most likely is, perhaps if it's resonating and you're excited about learning about it, then it is your right time. It's your divine timing
yeah,
to learn your Chiron placement.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you'd see the thing and be like, this is interesting, and then like you might find it interesting, but you won't feel called to seek. And so that's really the way that, yeah, I try to distinguish.
Yeah.
It can be interesting, and you may learn stuff from it, but when we find the lesson plan of the moment, it'll feel very intriguing to us. Like, it'll call us into it usually.
Yes. Yes.
It will feel almost like we have to spend an hour and look all this up right now about this thing.
Yes. Yes.
And then we just
It's
have to do it. It's important. And like,
that.
we'll even tell the kids or something, oh, I can't do that right now, I'm busy. We're just and we're like researching something, right? So
Totally.
yeah, so that's sort of the indicator that I like to look at. Yeah.
So yeah, and just to wrap up a bit of my experience with it, and then I'd love to hear your
Sure, yeah.
Chiron placement, is I have had this fear, this wound my whole life. I've been very aware of it. And definitely the volume of it got turned up after my divorce, which would coincide pretty well with my Chiron return. And then I've also had this knowingness that I feel I'm supposed to learn financial abundance for myself and then help others with it. And so I'm really excited. I'm excited that it is my path to heal this wound in this lifetime and to help others with it. And so I want to almost just really keep that in the forefront of my mind, that, okay, I do have this wound, I do have some fear around this, but I am here to heal it and empower others around it. So I just think this is very, very empowering, very exciting,
Yeah.
very it's so positive. Like, we're here in this lifetime to, sorry, I was using the word heal, to remember, as you really delineated that well, to remember who we are and remember that infinite abundance is always available to us
Yeah.
as creator beings.
Healing's an okay word, but it just implies that something was wrong.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I always say expand, but remember, to me, as you explained it, is, and I use it too, is more accurate. It's just,
Yeah.
just remembering.
I like expanding as well as remembering, because that's how I see what remembering is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we believe we're a limited, smaller self, and as we remember, we expand into the infinite.
Yes.
So I like both of those, but we always were the infinite. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
like, so just like the universe, we contract and expand like that,
Yes.
and then we
Yes,
do it,
yes,
and
yes,
then we
yes.
do it again.
Yes, that's the fun of the game we're in.
I wanted to say that it must be really reassuring to have the sort of drive to figure out financial woundings and deal with those, balance that in yourself, and then feel like, oh, I could probably help others with this, and then find out that that's like the whole Chiron thing, and that it just makes a lot of sense with what you already intuitively felt called to do, right?
Yes. And I just want to say, and thank you for reflecting that back. That was really beautiful. I want to say that this has been my experience all the time, and probably other people's too, that I have knowingnesses that are they're very clear. I just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And then at times in the past, I'd go to like a psychic healer, and they would always just confirm my knowingness. And I basically just stopped doing that, and I just trust my knowingness. So to me, this is another example of trust yourself,
Yes.
trust your knowingness.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Correct, and it's there, it's real.
Yeah,
this is just another example of that.
Can I spend just a minute to talk a little bit of esoteric metaphysics about psychic work?
Sure.
So a lot of psychics, divinity gets perceived in so many different ways, right? So depending on the psychic's capability, clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, whatever it is, um, basically they're experiencing your energetic field. And so in your field, you may have, you could call it maybe chunks of passed down loved ones. Like their energy is melded into yours. They can also be called in and stuff too. But psychics are more or less just reading your energy field. And then, because of the way humans are and speech and all that, it then gets distorted through their perspective and said to you. And
Yeah.
so you can find really good psychics that will pick up on stuff that you weren't aware of, right? That maybe you were like just sort of maybe what's the word, like sort of aware of, like but
Yeah.
below the surface. So
Yeah.
psychics I find are very very good at bringing some of that stuff up, but almost always we're already aware of it
Yes.
because the universe can't bring, again, the universe can't bring to us stuff we're not aware of. If we're not aware of it and the psychic says it, either the psychic's distorted or they're bringing it up a little bit early and we're not likely going to resonate so much with it. But a lot of times we're going to psychics and we're just sort of getting confirmation.
Yeah.
And when they're predicting the future for us, what they're doing is they're calculating probability from observing potentials in the Akash. And so, if you send a person down an aisle to get cereal, and the aisle is on one side, there's two sides. One side, it's Captain Crunch, just thousands of them, right? And then the other side is a whole bunch of random specks of other things. Um, it's not necessarily more likely the person would pick Captain Crunch, but the amount of Captain Crunch energy that's in that aisle is vastly bigger than the other smaller opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way the consciousness tends to work is whatever's most empowered tends to be the route that ends up getting followed. So when psychics are predicting the future, they're sort of guessing at probabilities, and they can't always see the alternate proper probabilities. So they're basically, whenever you go to a psychic, take everything with a grain of salt, of course. Whenever they talk to you about your future, just know distinctly that it doesn't have to be what they're saying. It doesn't at all have to be that. And then if they're reflecting back to you, probably you'll notice what Tassel said is that we go to psychics usually because we don't trust our own knowing, and then they reflect it back to us and they confirm it for us and we feel better. And that's great. There's a time for that. Like it helps us to solidify ourselves, to be reassured, right? So that's one of the ways that we get reassured, and they're providing a great service for doing that. But so I don't want to
Yes.
diminish
Yes.
anything they do, but there's a
Yes.
bit of a misunderstanding, I think, of how it works. Even with psychics, don't often understand precisely what's going on energetically with them, and they start to
Yes.
think that they're doing things they're not doing,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So I
Yeah.
wanted to bring
And
that up.
thank you. That was very helpful. And in my experience, the more I came back to myself and the more connected I was and aligned, the more obvious my own knowingness was. So it did take me a while to come back to myself after my
Yeah.
whole life experience. Um, so, like in the beginning, if I went to a psychic, it wouldn't necessarily be confirmation because I was not very in touch with my knowingness at that point. But as I awakened and became more connected and aligned, my knowingness was more obvious in my being. And then, as you said, it was kind of helpful to go to psychics for a while and to
Hmm.
keep getting this confirmation. And then it was part of what helped me just trust myself,
Yeah, it
trust
helps us
trust my own
realize
knowingness.
I already knew this stuff. I didn't really need to do all this. Maybe we have to go 100
Yes.
times, but eventually we
Yes.
realize.
Yeah.
When we think that someone else has the answers about us, and it's a really weird thing that humans got ourselves into with this
Yes.
idea.
Yes.
It's so
Yes.
strange because if we just take a second and step out of it,
Yes.
why on earth would anyone else know more about you than you?
Yes,
Why?
in every
In
aspect
any
of
aspect at
you,
all.
including your physical health,
Now,
including your emotional,
right.
you know,
Now, a
when we
doctor,
return.
like a physician, may understand like the mechanics of the body better, of course. But I'm talking about like our, um, and they may understand pharmacology better or have some of the sciences better understood. But you are your own sort of science. They don't know your
Yes.
science, right?
Yes. And you can
Um,
ask
yeah,
within to your body what your body needs, and you can also heal your body too.
totally.
Um and then I just want to quickly say, I forgot to mention this, that because you said that as we remember and heal and expand around our Chiron wound, this also helps us reach our north node, moving from our south node to our north node in this incarnation. And so I'll just quickly give my example. My south node is in Libra, my north node is in Aries. So in this lifetime, I'm I'm taking what's great about the Libra South node, which is basically so great at relationships, so great at compromise, cooperation, able to sacrifice, put oneself sort of in the back seat, all of that. But the Aries North node, which is where my soul really is encouraging me to go in this lifetime, is about independence, self sufficiency, being a bit self centered in terms of like the life mission and what you want to do in your life. So to me, it really makes sense that um, healing my Chiron wound about financial independence is certainly helping me achieve my Aries North node, which is about independence and self sufficiency.
Yeah,
So it all makes sense.
it all
It's
makes sense.
like
And
my life plan is like, oh, yes, it all makes
and I
sense.
should say I didn't read anything about Chiron moving you into the North Node or being one of the things that move you in. I That's just an intuitive thing that I said. So
Yeah,
that
it
may
makes
not be
sense.
it may not be a principle, but it feels like one. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
it makes
so I
sense.
said it, but I say I don't care really what people write down. I just say whatever I want. So
Well,
it's
you're speaking from your knowingness, is what we just talked about
well,
trusting your
exactly. I
knowingness.
mean
Yeah.
that I see it that way, and you know it's okay if it doesn't make sense for others, but
It's funny too, because I come from such an academic environment. I have two master's degrees and a PhD, where if I wrote any type of paper,
yeah,
and we all know this, I had to cite every
everything
single
I know.
thing.
Yeah,
So it's such an interesting thing to come back to our own knowingness.
yeah. That would drive me nuts to have to do that.
Yeah, it was awful, really. Okay, can we let's talk about your Chiron placement, and then we can talk about how people can
Sure.
find
So
theirs.
I'm just gonna show. I'm gonna put something on the screen for the houses, the astrology houses, because this is important. Um, and let me just hide that. Okay. So you can see that it goes from the first house all the way around to the 12th house. And so the first house is I am, the second house is I have. So it's awareness of self. And then the second house is personal resources. And then there's the immediate environment, inner world, personal creativity, daily life, awareness of others. And it just, expands around. So the reason that I wanted to show this is that the house of your Chiron will change the flavoring of what that wound shows up like for you. Um, and so I'm first house, appearance and outward personality, and my Chiron is in Gemini. Um, so Gemini is about communication and intelligence and stuff like that. Um, so uh, my Chiron wounding is basically about me not feeling like I'm able to properly articulate what needs to be said, feeling like it's kind of impossible to communicate my needs, or not my needs, but my what I'm trying to express is like basically impossible to say. Um, also I have things like um, I think about things in a in my mind in like flow charts almost is sort of how I see stuff. Like so when we're having a conversation, for example, if somebody says uh if they say something like I think and this is an example that really I'd like to express this because I think this will be helpful for Tassel to hear. So when somebody says, and hopefully she's okay with this because I don't think we've talked about this, but if somebody says something like, "We need to, I don't know," or Sean, can you spend more time doing, I don't know, let's say marketing. Let's just say something like that.
Which is something I have said.
You didn't say it quite like that, but yeah, I mean, basically.
Yeah.
So the way that my mind works is I see the conversation in almost in its entirety from that single sentence. I see the branches of like subconscious or root beliefs that would inform this expression. So I see that in the other person, and then I see my and this it's weird, and I often get myself into trouble with this, and this is part of the communication challenge, is because when I express to another their subconscious belief, they're not aware of it because it's subconscious, and I could be wrong also, of course. That's always a possibility. But I see these subconscious sort of uh, foundations that, in order for this thing to be expressed, as far as I can tell, these foundations must be there. These core beliefs that are misaligned is usually how I see them. I'm really good at seeing it with other people, not as good in myself. I do these things too. Everyone does it. It's subconscious. That's the purpose of it, is to not be aware of our core beliefs. But so I might see that this type of expression, I will go, she's afraid of money things,
My
right?
Chiron wound.
Right. Her Chiron wound is like, this is clearly a wound, and
Yeah.
she hasn't even expressed fear. She hasn't even said anything, but I see it already, and then because I'm a baby, I get offended. I get hurt. And I'm like, why is she afraid? She doesn't think I'm good enough. Right? Like, so I start to take it personally that
Mhm.
she has fear. And then I want to express, I can see your fear, right? I want to tell her, like, I can see your fear here, but I don't know how to do that without, like, making it sound like I'm just tossing crap at her, right? Like,
Mhm.
or judging her, or basic any of that. Um, but all of these things come up all at the same time, and it creates this tornado of just, what am I supposed to say or do here? I The answer to the fear is not to go do a bunch of stuff. It's to address the fear, I think. And I can certainly go do stuff, so I'll always, I'll say something like, yeah, I'll do whatever we want, because I don't think that makes much of a difference. That calms the part of the mind that's saying, okay, I'll feel better if we do this or that, but that's a temporary calming, and then it will come back again. So when I see the root fear expressing something, I feel called to, like, try to bring it out somehow, like, let's dig it out, because I see it as a wound, like they see it as painful or like suffering, basically, that the other person may or may not be aware of, and it's a psychic kind of thing that I have. So that's the best way to describe it. It's a psychic. I'm picking up on an energy that is there, and I can be wrong, and I can distort it as well. I can also misinterpret it. So I can think that, oh, she, like, I can think it's very negative towards me, or I can, I can distort it into a bit of a story and stuff. But usually if I throw that story away, which is what I try to do, I try not to make any assumptions out of anything. I try to just be like, no, there is fear there though. I can feel it. I feel the fear informing this expression. And when that happens, I get in real conflict. And if it happens enough, I'm lost because I'm like, there's so much fear and I don't know how to traverse it. I don't know how to say it properly. I don't want to offend anyone. I feel like I often speak and put my foot in my mouth. So this is part of the Gemini and Chiron second or first house wounding, is that I feel that I don't know how to intelligently communicate my points while not hurting people, or the amount of times that I've said just very benevolent, loving, peaceful things and somebody has flipped out is like, I would be surprised if other people have experienced it to the degree that I have. And I know that's just my victim. That's my victim, complaining about how hard my life is. But with our Chiron wounds, that's how it's gonna feel. It's gonna feel until we. That's the other thing that's good to mention, is that we'll feel victimized by our Chiron wounds until we realize that it's those that will bring us our strength, and we become the empowered sort of wounded healer. Like we become empowered through or balancing all of this. And so yeah, it's really important. If you have anything like I do, where you see subconscious or root, what you feel seems to be a fear in the other person, it's part of your fear that you're seeing. So that's the first thing that you have to know. So if you're in my situation, so if I'm seeing somebody express something in fear, I'm seeing that fear because it's part of, I have the fear too. So, and so I need to accept it. And that's why it's showing up this way. So I have that fear as well. So it's not fair to judge anyone because you're seeing your own fear. But then the second part is you could be seeing it wrong or distorting it into a story, which I've done a lot of as I've learned how to manage being able to see this stuff. The issue is that with this type of capacity, and I was saying this to Tassel, I think last night or the night before, that often when I'm speaking to people, I can see their beliefs don't align with the words they're saying in the moment. And a lot of times what's happening is people are speaking their ideals. They're speaking like what they would like to be, or where they would like to be, but they still have some resistances or fears that are there that come up time to time, and which is normal. Like that's everyone does. I do that too. But because I see it, it creates this issue in myself where I don't feel like people are telling me the truth. It feels like people are lying to me a lot because they will say lots of positive or good things, no fear, but then they'll come around and say the fear-based thing. And so what ends up happening is I'm like, well, which one? Where are you with this? Because and it's unreasonable for me to even do that, which is the other problem. It's unreasonable for me to expect that just because someone says, this is the way I'd like to go, and I am not afraid or whatever. It's unreasonable for me to expect that no resistance at all comes up. Like it's just a purity like this. That's insane. People don't do that. They have resistance. I have resistance. Whenever it doesn't matter even how excited I am about something, there's usually still a little bit somewhere of something resisting it, like just a little tiny sliver even of just like, oh, you maybe you shouldn't do that, you're not good enough, or whatever. And so it's really important for me to remember that these things that I'm seeing, and I try to do this, but it can feel like a nightmare a little bit. But the things that I'm seeing are not I don't have to turn it into all the stuff. It doesn't have to be a big whole thing. Um, and it's that big whole story of what they believe, what I think they believe, what I think they're doing, what I think their intentions are, and forming this whole story, and then trying to speak in regards to this story instead of just speaking what I'm seeing. Um, it would be a lot better if she said we could do some marketing, and then I could just say, it feels like you're afraid of something. Could we talk about that?
That
And
sounds like such a healthy conversation. Yeah.
yeah, because basically I'm just ignoring the marketing because I don't care about the marketing. Um, like, I mean, I'll do the marketing. When I say I don't care, I just mean I just mean I'll do A, B, or C option. These are just details that, like, you know, whatever way, whatever thing to do is fine. Um, but I'm interested in making sure we do those things from places of inspiration instead of fear. And so when we're doing something from fear, I get concerned that we're not on the path. The path, uh, that's all. And so I try to check. I want to check and make sure. But because I'm worried about hurting feelings, I'm worried about a whole bunch of crap. I don't just say I feel fear coming up here around something, and I shouldn't make assumptions about what it is. I shouldn't. I could maybe I'm not feeling fear. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I if I'm feeling it, then at least I'm having something with it, right? So um,
Yeah. So, first of all, may I ask you? So, you said if if you, Sean, is seeing my fear around finances come up, then that must mean you also have some of that fear too. Is that true?
if it bothers me, then there's something in me that makes me think that it's not okay. So it means that there's a part of me somewhere that is having a similar energy that is misaligned in me. Otherwise, I would see it in you and I would not think anything
It,
of it at all.
it
Basically, I
wouldn't
would just see
really.
it as it is, and I wouldn't feel, this one's hard because for me, I feel part of my job here is to help people see these things in themselves. That's my job, I think, is to help them learn how to see it in themselves. Um, I can't, uh, and so sometimes I feel no attachment to the thing at all, but I see it and I still feel called to say something. Other times I see the fear and it's a little unsettling, I guess. And I still may feel called to talk about it. But when it's unsettling, that means that I have a fear there also. So
So, if I bring up fears around money, say in our business or whatever, is it unsettling for you? Is it bringing up something for you too?
when you bring up fears about things, money, it's not. I don't have the fear so much. Like there's a small fear around money, but it's very small. Primarily, I have a fear that um, what I bring will not be good enough. That's primarily the fear. So sometimes when somebody's saying something like, "Oh, we need to do this or that to make more money," um, that fear in me, that it gets sort of distorted a little bit, and then I see it as a value thing. I take it personally. Um, but I think that I'm meant to do that so that I can heal all this stuff quicker than because part of uh, if I take everything personally, right, then I'm looking at my shadow a lot, right? So so that's my theory on why, because I was asking I'm trying to figure out in myself, why do I twist these things this way? Why does it twist into like she's scared about money, and now that means somehow like I can see that it's being twisted. I'm like, I'm not crazy. I can see it that it's twisting and distorting and then turning into this whole other thing. The two are not related really, but I can see I could relate them, right? Like, but I'm making it happen and I can see that. That's part of the reason that my mind feels like such a nightmare, because I'm watching it with its insanity do these things, and then I'm observing it and going, this is not, doesn't seem like a good thing to do. Doesn't seem, but I feel that the reason I do it is to the observe how all of this relates to me and my wounds now. And sometimes that hurts, and sometimes because of all that pain, I get confused, and then I judge what's going on, or I might judge the other person, and then I have to move out of that. So, I basically, I don't mean to do this, but what ends up happening is I take everything personally, and then I don't know how to talk about it properly, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and I don't want to, all that stuff.
Yes, this is so. I first want to just say to anyone listening that if you are in a relationship, I think it is so helpful for each person to look into their Chiron placement. Because you and I just even talking about this today on the stream, I think is very helpful for our relationship, because we've been going through some stuff together, and it does seem that a bit of the foundation of the stuff that we've been traversing for probably at least a month has been about my financial fears and in our business. And it has felt like you may have been taking it kind of personally, that I was somehow like thinking less of you or something, which I wasn't. I was just having fears about finances over here and trying to talk about them in terms of our business. And then I think, as you're saying, you may have, added some stuff to what I was saying and maybe taken it a bit personally. And then has, it, it created a lot of stuff between us.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I definitely do that. In this case, uh, I was doing a pretty good job of not doing it. Uh, but I don't want to get into all of it. But
Okay.
you know, there were particular things that you were scared of about me that I saw, and you mentioned them to me. But anyways, so there are times when I do twist it and make it about myself when it's not so much, and then there are times when it is about me, uh, or about something with us together or whatever. Um, I see those basically as the same thing.
Yes. And
Uh,
I wasn't trying to say that it is all co-created, and I wasn't trying to say one person was doing something the other person wasn't. And I hear what you're saying. I just think at the base foundation of what was really going on for me, and I think I even texted this to you last night, was just if finances, like that was the base fear for me. Everything
yeah.
else was more peripheral, um, around you or anything. It just, the base is just my Chiron wound, really. But not to say that I wasn't, you know, doing things and saying things and stuff. But I think what I was trying to say was that our Chiron wounds really came into play with each other over the past month. I would is what I was really trying to express.
Mm-hmm.
And that it might be really helpful for other people in close relationships to just look into their Chiron wounds and talk about them and just see how they are maybe creating different things between you all, and just how to like look at it more objectively and clearly, and oh, I'm just speaking from my fear. Oh, I am too. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's all fine. I just yeah, I didn't want you to think that I was twisting everything in this particular instance. I do that. I do that, but I can see when I'm doing it usually too. That's part of the struggle that I have because I have conflicting Gemini's the twins, right? So it's and I think most of us have this capacity within. We can see with our divinity and we can see with our lower self. But with me, it's almost like the two are trying to struggle for who can talk and who can express and stuff. And it's a bit of an odd situation because I can see the confusion, but it's almost like I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I think that often the Chiron wounds and the woundings will, they'll affect everything more or less, right? Like my inability, or not inability, but my challenges with communication will affect everything that we do in the relationship. And your fears in regards to money or financial stability will affect everything that we do in the business and all that stuff, right? So the Chiron wounds are going to have a huge impact. So if you can know your partners, it'll make sense to you most likely too. Know yours and know your partners, and then you can just at least be aware. It's not important. It's not, you don't have to help them heal it. It doesn't really work like that. But if you're aware, then, it's easier to hold space, I think, because you can kind of understand where it's coming from a bit. Like, so sometimes when people are upset, and you're not upset, you can kind of be like, where is this coming from? Right? Like, why are they freaking out? At least I can feel that way sometimes. And, one thing that I just try to remember is that they're learning stuff. They know what they're doing. From a soul level, they know what they're doing, but we could just think that, they've had probably this wounding that's been probably building up, like, and then now it's sort of bubbled over. And so it's often, something with their north node or south node, or moving into their north node, or Chiron placement, or it could be Mercury retrograde doing something, confusing conversations. And that's the other thing too, is because my Chiron is about communication and all that stuff. So when Mercury goes retrograde, everything gets wacky for me as well. So I start to say things not quite right, or I'll use words I shouldn't use that don't indicate precisely what I'm trying to say. Tassel and I are usually pretty precise with how we speak, or we try to be, because we understand that our words imply things, and the choice of words are important. Try to be, it's almost, I don't know how Tassel thinks about this, but even just word selection can be very, very challenging for me, because I feel if I'm using the wrong word, I'm lying. I feel like I'm being dishonest. And so sometimes I'm literally just sitting, waiting to try and figure out what the word is that I'm trying to describe the way that I'm feeling, or what I think about something. And so I can end up just sitting there in this stalemate in myself, because I can't find a particular word that accurately in English describes what I'm thinking about, or, you know what I mean? So
in our Namaste method, which is all about basically higher conscious communication between people, one of the principles is stick to the facts, ma'am. And just, as you're saying, just like try to be super precise, because words all have associations, and then the other person may just take off and running with those associations. So
and then
for both the speaker and the receiver to stick to the facts, to be precise in the word we use, and then for the receiver not to add on a bunch of assumptions and stories about the word that was used, to
Yeah.
keep it as clean as possible.
Yeah, like for example, the word I really like this word to highlight that the word itself is not positive or negative. So the word manipulate. When we hear that word, we tend to think, well, that's not a great word. It's a negative kind of word. But when I am doing this, I'm manipulating, right? There is no negativity to manipulation, unless there's negativity to the manipulation, right? So we have to be really careful with the words we choose, because I could use the word manipulate, right? Like people speak to manipulate each other constantly. That's the reason for communication, is to manipulate through the delivering of more information to allow the other person to make new choices. Unless the only expression is like I'm just offering my truth. Usually there's some intention somewhere, like there's some because, and if there is a because, then there's manipulation happening because we have a goal, right? And manipulation again is not bad. It's we're for example, if I want my driveway snow shoveled by my children, I'll go say, hey, Sawyer, will you go shovel the driveway? And he'll go, yeah. So now I've manipulated him. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's not a bad thing to manipulate. And so I'm just trying to correct, to highlight that when we hear I manipulated Sawyer into shoveling the driveway, it sounds bad, right? It sounds, I hear it too. But the true meaning of the word, it's not bad. And so we just have to be really careful. The word manipulate is important, but we just have to be careful around the words we're picking and how those words show up, and each person experiences them differently. I chose manipulate because most people, when they hear that word, they think it sounds pretty bad, sounds pretty negative to manipulate, but they're not noticing that there are very neutral and also positive manipulations that happen all the time. Like, if somebody's not eating properly and they're like, let's say they're anorexic, and they're very, very skinny, and you convince them to eat, you've manipulated them. You have. Now
Yes.
they've chosen to eat and all that, but it's it's a positive thing. You've helped them, right? And so, anyways, all I'm trying to say is, when you're using the words, understand that not only is there your distortion of what it means to manipulate. So for me, my distortion of manipulate is quite neutral, but I do see the negative as well. But with other people, if I said manipulate, they think of it as a bad thing. And so when we're using any words, we just want to understand that each word is sort of ran through this filter of, is this word good? Is this word good? Is this word good? As they're reading it, they're doing that so quickly.
Mindful.
Yeah, just being very mindful of the words.
Maybe we could just wrap up by showing people how to look up their Chiron placement.
How would we do that?
Okay, well, I have some information about it.
Oh, okay, good. I thought I was, when you said show, I thought you meant put it on the stream.
No.
And so I was like, I don't have anything prepared to show. But yeah,
and
okay.
I'll put this into the description as well.
Okay.
But so you can just Google, like, find your Chiron placement. But for instance, cafeastrology.com has the Chiron tables, and it just basically shows the dates where Chiron is moving into different zodiac signs.
Right.
So if you go to cafeastrology.com/Chiron signs tables.html, you will find your where Chiron was on the date of your birth.
Yeah, not all charts will have Chiron in it necessarily. I think Tassel has a chart that doesn't have it. or no, it
No,
does have it. It
mine
does have
does
it.
have it. Yeah.
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 So,
Um,
but not all charts necessarily will have it, I don't think.
yes. And then if you have your astrological natal chart, you can find your Chiron placement in the house in one of the 10 houses. Um, so those are the ways to find your Chiron placement.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing with your north node and south node. Just Google looking up your north node. It's just your time of birth and the date, the time, and your place of birth.
Yeah, maybe I'll
So
just really quickly say about Chiron, my Chiron in the North Node. So my North Node's Taurus, so I'm basically standing in my truth and authenticity and all that, which is really hard to do if I don't know how to speak, right? So this is just an example of through healing the Chiron wound will move us into the North Node generally, like or at least really contribute to being able to embody that characteristic. And the North Node, it when we first look at it, we could feel like, oh, that doesn't seem so great to do that role, to play that role. And the reason we're feeling that is because we're resisting uncomfortable areas of ourselves that we would have to embody in order to do that, right? So the more comfortable you feel when you observe what the North Node looks like is how you can sort of grade your progress so far. So
yes,
like, how often
absolutely.
am I standing in my power and truth and authenticity, and when am I not? And you can grade yourself almost on your whole pathway just by looking at your North Node and how well you're able to embody that and how consistently and that type of thing. And then, maybe we'll do another thing with calibrating your consciousness to understand your frequency level in a numerical way. We can get into that.
Oh, the levels of uh Hawkins, that
Yeah, power versus force.
power versus force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've calibrated um, fourth, fifth, and sixth density consciousness now um,
Hmm.
in power versus force, uh, or from Dr. Hawkins modeling, and so now we have an idea of vibration or frequencies that in a logarithmic scale that are that start at 1,000 at the end of third density and then raise higher than that. And it's really interesting stuff. But we can, in order to graduate third density, so the North Node is sort of the like goal for the lifetime and a bunch of the healing. But to graduate third density and to ascend, the the goal is different. It's not necessarily related to the personality. So the way that I like to see this is the astrology is about the forming of the personality and the way the personality is. And so the North Node is like the ideal primary sort of energy of the personality. Not the entirety. It's not, and also trying to inhabit mostly the positive sides, not as much the shadow sides, that type of thing. And that's all great. But the graduation is about your capacity for unconditional love and acceptance, as well as service to others. So, or to yourself if you're going that way. But so they're sort of separate trajectories. So the personality one doesn't necessarily influence your harvestability or your ascension timelines. It doesn't necessarily, like, you can basically be working through all of these wounds. The reason I say this is because I don't want people to go and be like, I got all these wounds, I must not be ready to ascend, I must have to repeat Earth. And they get very, I've spoken to clients that are very cycled or cyclical in this sort of sadness of having to return here. But I also want to say that the sadness or fear of having to return here indicates that you're not ready to leave. So what you need to be able to do is to accept the entirety of the third density experience for what it is, and then the personality and the zodiac and that you're moving through that way is more like a more like your personality's story is a better way to think about that. That's your story of your life, and the ascension stuff is your vibration, is how much unconditional love you're holding and showing up to serve. So
It's almost like the human story is the North Node, South Node, the Chiron
yeah,
wounding, etc. And then the larger story of unconditional love and acceptance is the big spiritual story of your soul.
yeah, like, well, yeah, we could say it that way. We could say it that way. Yeah, the astrology is like the story, the hero's journey, you could call it,
Mm-hmm.
like going through woundings and pains and then coming out of the challenges into the strength, right? That tends to be the trajectory constantly. Um, but you can start and be very wounded and broken in many ways in your personality and have a whole bunch of struggles, and then but still start to embrace unconditional love and still make to a point of graduation while having wounds,
Yes,
um, to a
yes.
degree.
And that, yeah, I think that's something that we always talk about, that that's um the like perhaps the most important aspect to keep in mind is like we may not feel together at times, we may feel wounded, we may be working through lots of stuff, but that we're in a spiritual perspective and a larger perspective, we're on the path of when we're unconditionally loving and accepting and to ourselves to start to others, that this is the perhaps the most important piece.
Yeah, and you like you know, I think the best thing to do is to literally just not worry about it, as best you can. Not worry about like where you are on the, like, where am I at? Like, it's a human thing to want to grade ourselves and stuff. So I offered some ways that we could learn how to do that,
Yeah.
to discern where our consciousness is at. It is very helpful, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not helpful unless the ego cannot grab it. And like, we need to
Yeah.
be able to step aside from it and just be like, that's interesting information. That's how it needs to be. It's interesting, useful
Yeah.
information. It's not our identity. It's not, we're not going too slow. We're not, there's no speed. In a channeling the other day, Ka said, you're not catching a train. You are the train. You stop, you go, and you wait idle as you please.
Mm-hmm.
You judge yourself about it, but no one else is judging it. All your guides and higher self, no one else cares how fast you're going. You're the only one doing that to yourself. So we can really just don't do that. We don't need to do
Yeah.
that. It's totally constructed. Basically, there's no basis in reality of pushing ourselves to be fast. We could push ourselves to be better, of course, but the speed of it all is like totally fabricated by us. And so yeah, I wanted to say that while also offering the ways, because it is useful to like look at where we're at, right? It's useful.
Beautiful. All
Beautiful.
right. So just thank you so much for joining us. And if you enjoyed the video, we'd so appreciate if you liked it and subscribe to the channel. And we also have an amazing Patreon community. And I believe tomorrow night we have a
Oh my god, it's tomorrow night
metaphysical
already.
gathering. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes, we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe yeah, okay. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, so we have that tomorrow night with Sean, which is amazing. And so just so many blessings to everyone with their Chiron, remembering expansion and everything
Go
else.
be your beautiful centaur selves.
Yes, so much love to everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Bye.